Thank you for being here today, and thank you to the Social Enterprise Program, and thank you to the governing board of the conference and to the student organizers, and a special thanks to Katie Field, who's my classmate here at Columbia Business School, and it's out of her vision that this panel has grown. My name is Lane Harwell, and I'm a former dancer turned arts manager, now Columbia Business School student, and as of 2 weeks ago, the director of Dance NYC, which is the city's dance advocacy organization. So now I'm trying to do both, which is a challenge, but it's precisely the topic of this conference is arts meeting business, and I'm no longer thinking of it in the abstract. To my right, stage right here, house left, we have Craig Hatkoff of the Tribeca Film Festival, who's also part of the Columbia family. We have Chris Elam of Misnomer Dance and also the audience engagement platform. To his right, Patricia Cruz of Harlem Stage. To her right, Randall Bourscheidt of Alliance for the Arts, which is an arts-wide advocacy and service organization in New York. And we have Paul Guenther, also part of the Columbia family, and the former CEO of PaineWebber. I'm going to let our guests introduce themselves. We have an hour. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, and I'm going to then moderate a discussion, which will include questions and answers from the audience. But first, a few remarks on our topic, developing arts audiences, capital, and consumption. We take as our starting point today the idea that developing arts audiences and arts participation, being an arts audience, is a worthwhile investment. The byline to our panel topic, capital and consumption, highlights the circularity between capital, by which I mean money, and also factors of production, be it education or social status, drives consumption. Consumption, in turn, drives capital, intellectual and socioeconomic development. Arts audiences, audience for dance, theater, music, film, are hard to define and quantify. They differ in interests and demographics. Their role in the larger creative economy crosses the for-profit, nonprofit, and government sectors. Their participation varies depending on available education, on media, on live or electronic arts, on community engagement, and on location-specific infrastructures for the arts, ease of access. Audience members measure their investment in the arts differently. Did they enjoy the show? Did it move them? Who did they meet at the performance? And there is not as yet an industry-wide method for analyzing audience. We're at Columbia Business School, so it's important for us to think of arts audiences as consumers, and also to acknowledge that whether for-profit or nonprofit, the arts are good for business. To cite some facts from Randall Bourscheidt's Alliance for the Arts study on the economic impact of the arts in New York, total annual economic impact, $25.7 billion. Of which $5.4 billion comes from arts-motivated visitors. Jobs generated, 194,000. Wages generated, 9.8 billion. And taxes to New York State, 1.2 billion. According to a separate Alliance for the Arts survey of New York City audiences in 2005, local nonprofit cultural venues draw an audience of almost 26 million, which is more than the numbers going to Broadway theater or commercial sporting events combined. Our exercise today is to engage you, the business sector, in investigating the opportunities and challenges for the arts as arts consumption evolves, and point to strategies for building arts audiences and harnessing their potential for social enterprise. A few more data points to contextualize our conversation. A 2008 National Endowment for the Arts survey cites this worrying trend. Arts audiences are growing older and their numbers are declining. Another NEA report, Audience 2.0, highlights an increase in participation in electronic media, 53% of Americans participate in the arts through electronic and digital media, while only 35% participate in live experiences. Audiences who participate through electronic media alone are more diverse than live audiences. A 2009 Dance NYC study, for which I should be proud, on the economic impact, or the impact of the recession on dance groups in New York, showed that 40% of respondents experienced what they deemed a significant, quote unquote, decline in ticket sales. A final business fact. According to the National Arts Service Organization, Americans for the Arts, business support to the arts has shifted from general charitable giving to a more marketing-based and sponsorship-oriented strategy. Quote, this enables businesses to support the arts as well as to use the arts to meet business goals, expand markets for products, and engage employees. These data points give color to a shifting landscape for audience development, with audience demographics, marketing tools, policy, and financial resources all in flux, creating opportunities and challenges for social entrepreneurs, such as our panelists today. So with that stage set, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves, and as they do so, I will pose them this first question. Who are your audiences? How do you know? And how do you define your personal and organizational return on investment in those audiences? Craig.
All right, we'll play with the format a little.
Play with the format as you will.
Quick introduction and then down the row, or just go right into it.
I think you should go right into it, and we have an hour, so we're trying to be as brief as possible.
Okay, so I will deliver a 90-minute lecture in 5 minutes, and to show you that I'm committed to it.
Thank you.
I'm going to start. Actually, I have some panelists here who've already seen this, but I'm going to start. Change is hard, and with that, I have a 9-second video that I'm not sure there's much art in it, but there's a lot of message, and we may have to play it twice, so I'm using up 18 seconds.
Electronic media.
Watch carefully. Do we need to play it again, or does everybody want to watch it one more time? We take a vote. This is audience participation.
Can we share it with a friend?
Yeah, share it with a friend. That's great. Okay.
Wow.
So change is hard, and the message is, get on the bus, get off the bus, just don't get in front of the bus. And for every arts organization, broadly defined, for-profit, not-for-profit, performing arts, live arts, media in general, every business model that you could possibly know, if it's working today, there's a better than 80% chance within 20 years it will not be working. Some people have 6 to 12 months. Some people will go on. Some people will succeed, but it is a challenge every day, and I'm sure if we go down the road, you wake up and say, oh my God, how are we going to make this work? So my introduction, now that we've seen the change is hard part, is I'm Craig Hatkoff, graduated from Columbia in '78, spent about 25 years in the finance and real estate business, got out before the big implosion, and somewhat by accident ended up becoming one of the co-founders with Robert De Niro and my wife, Jane Roosevelt, the Tribeca Film Festival, shortly after September 11th. We thought we would do a one-time event. We hoped to get a couple thousand, maybe 5,000 to 10,000 people back downtown to see some films. And what happened was something we never anticipated, which was the first year our 10,000 attendance turned out to be 150,000. And you say, well, how does that happen? It happens through a large engagement. There are only so many tickets that you can sell to see a film, to go to the opera, to see a dance performance, but community engagement, because we're really here to talk about where's the audience, is I think what the future is how do you engage the community and how do you use technology to push out your experience. And it's a very interesting conversation. I'm going to give a couple of pointers. Tribeca, going into our 10th year, we get on average now about 400, and if the weather's really good, 500,000 visitors a year. We generate probably about $100 million a year of economic activity. But what we knew coming out of the first year the festival was 5 days, second year 7 days, third year 9 days. We're now a 12-day event. And from an economic standpoint, trying to run a 12-day event with a year-round infrastructure and overhead, the math really doesn't work. So we had to figure out new ways of doing things. And going back to the point I found in preparation, the NEA studies, audiences are getting older, and they're moving to less of the patronage model. Now, if you have a patronage model where people can write big checks, put it on buildings, that model, when it works, it's great. But I'm going to start with, one of the quotes that I love is from Abraham Maslow, which says, "When your only tool is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail." And what that really means is that in today's world, where change is hard, we have to find the new audiences. And I'm going to just talk a little bit about the Tribeca experience, give you a couple other very quick concepts, and then we'll sort of move it down and pick up in Q&A some of the questions. But Tribeca, if I said to someone, where is the Tribeca Film Festival? There's really no there. We have 2 little theaters that hold 100 seats, and each theater has a little entertainment area. We have a building that houses the Tribeca Film Center. There's probably our 50 employees are there, but there's no there for the Tribeca Film Festival. So we are somewhat of a virtual festival. Now, some years we would try to be completely in Lower Manhattan, but there are no venues in Lower Manhattan. So we have our one screening room down at Borough of Manhattan Community College. So we had to reinvent the notion of what is a venue. And the real answer is I came across a theory about 10 years ago called disruptive innovation theory, which is something I'd like you all to think about, which is fathered by a Harvard Business School professor, Clayton Christensen, whose book, Innovator's Dilemma, kind of shook up the world, where it said the following, that simpler, cheaper, more accessible, and even inferior products that are good enough to get the job done, that is a disruptive innovation. And it is disruptive innovation that typically blows an incumbent with a business model that was working fine. So we can go through many, many examples in the technology field. So IBM, you actually used to make computers. The mainframe was displaced by the mini computer, which was displaced by the PC, and now everything is being displaced by what you all have, I assume, your smartphone or soon-to-be smartphone. And these are all inferior products at first, but ultimately become more powerful. So this notion of disruptive innovation, I think, is a major, major theme. And so we look for things, doesn't have to do with the programming, but you have to look at things to find new audiences that may not be quite as sophisticated and different pricing points. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Metropolitan Opera, but this notion of disruptive innovation, everything we do at Tribeca, although everybody there might not know it, is through the lens of disruptive innovation. The other concept I want to just introduce is something called an essay. Everybody here know what Linux is? Okay, open source, we'll talk a little bit about open source, and I understand you may pick up on open source, but Linux was created by hundreds of thousands of programmers around the world, basically with no guidance, and is all self-organizing. Another great example of open source is Wikipedia. How many people here actually use Wikipedia? Okay. Do you know how many employees they have at Wikipedia? No, they are now up to 38. They're on a major campaign, but they get 450 million people a year go to Wikipedia. But it is an open source platform. And so this notion of, an essay was written by a fellow by the name of Eric Raymond, who articulated the open source movement and had 2 great observations. He said, there are cathedrals and there are bazaars. And open source is the bazaar, where it's virtually no design guideline specifications, and the audience, so we're talking about crowdsourcing, engaged people who actually create the product itself. The cathedral, and I can mention a lot of cathedrals, Tribeca Film Festival has a cathedral. And by way of example, there are a lot of cathedrals in the arts business where it's very narrow, hierarchical decision-making, very narrow design specifications. Curatorial control is essential or is one of the dominant themes, And what I think the challenge to find new audiences is to take this notion of disruptive innovation and look at it through the lens of the cathedral and the bazaar. And where I think the future of the audience is where we start to re-intermediate cathedrals with bazaars. I'm just going to throw out a couple of examples that will at least help you start thinking about it. The Guggenheim just actually announced, I think it's actually now up on the website, a project. Now, the Guggenheim is pretty much of a cathedral, a project with YouTube for art film. And so the Guggenheim YouTube project has now generated 10,000 submissions, which will all be reviewed by the Guggenheim, and that's a pretty big undertaking. But that's a cathedral coming into sort of interfacing with a bazaar. The other couple of examples that I think are very, very relevant and interesting is basically if you look at what MoMA did with Tim Burton. So Tim Burton, when they had the Tim Burton exhibit, I think it was one of the most popular and widely attended exhibits. Edgy, is that, you know, are we losing the mission, which is some of the concerns coming out, legitimate concerns, by the way. So when you have a Tim Burton putting on all of his the scenery and all of the stuff that makes those Tim Burton movies so special, I'm trying to think the props, it becomes a wildly interesting experience of creating a new audience. The other example, though, that I think is really, really interesting is what the Metropolitan Opera has done, which is, I think, one of the models everybody's got to take a look at. And this is sort of the simulcast. They've been around for God knows how long, since, I guess, 1880. But now they reach over 1 million people a year through these simulcasts. They've been on radio for a long time. They've been on TV. But that is a disruptive innovation. When you're sitting in Detroit, Michigan, and you're at a Regal Theater, it's high def. But a front row seat at the opera, if you can get one, is $300. But if you're sitting at a Regal Theater, it's $30. And they've been able to expand that audience by reaching for otherwise non-consumers. So I think the biggest challenge for the arts in attracting audience 2.0, which is what the NEA is talking about, is to deal with the curatorial issues and understand you're going to have a lot of threshold resistance between what the purely curatorial say versus the business side. But I think the holy grail for what we're really looking to do is re-intermediate, finding new audiences, and really bringing together, and I'll use the Tribeca example, then I'll kind of wrap up. When we started Tribeca, we can sell roughly 80,000 tickets a year. We sell all 80,000 tickets. There's nowhere else for us to go. It doesn't make sense. We have now moved on to a whole distribution company, which we reached this year on our VOD platforms and all these other alternative channels of distribution, close to 2 million people versus our 80,000. And so Tribeca now is no longer just the physical event, it's also the digital event. And I'm going to leave, I'll end up on the following, that there's a word that I like to use, and I think you may have heard it at the New York Times thing we did together, but there's physical and there's digital. And I think going phygital is the holy grail. So when you can integrate physical experiences and extend it in the digital world, I think that's where you'll find the new audiences. And I will pick up the rest, I guess, in Q&A.
Thank you. Thank you, Craig. And Chris.
All right. Thank you. I'm Chris Elam. I'm the founding choreographer for Misnomer Dance Theater, a contemporary dance company based here in New York. And in addition to making original new dances that we premiere in the city every year and a half and tour around the States and abroad, we have also been doing artistic collaborations that translate onto the web in various forms. So we did a collaboration with the musician Bjork, choreographing her Wanderlust video. We did a collaboration where we had motion capture sensors on our bodies, digitizing our dance, which was featured by Apple Computers in a mini documentary. And we did a project with the Sundance Channel where they did a mini documentary about the creative process in the studios when Misnomer is creating new dances. And I mention this because these are 3 different audience spaces that are creative-minded individuals, people who follow Bjork, people who follow Apple, people who follow Sundance, who are not necessarily familiar with dance. And by taking the kinetic form of our work and bringing it into these atmospheres, we've been able to broaden an awareness of the group. We then did a series of behind-the-scenes videos that we then linked across to the networks of these 3 different communities to draw the kind of a breadcrumb back towards the work that Misnomer was doing. So when we're thinking about who our audience is, we're thinking both about the people who are seeing us in the theater live, and we're also thinking about the different circles of audiences who intersect with and touch the company at different times and connect to get inspired by the group in different ways. We've, as a company, been experimenting with different third-party technologies as they've emerged over the past years in terms of how we could engage audiences in different ways. So we did a video remix contest in early 2007. We did web streaming in 2008, where we were in a very small theater. It was 72 seats. It was sold out. And we were streaming the performance to 2,000 viewers from 19 countries, including being projected on the wall in a coffee shop in Brooklyn and being viewed by a platoon in Iraq. So and we had a moderator who was there moderating the chat. So you could either watch it full screen or you could watch it with a chat. And somebody texted in, hey, could you please move the camera to the left? And the moderator kind of nudged the cameraman and he moved the camera to the left. And so these experiments were being done in a very low-cost, experimental manner, and just discovering and getting feedback and so forth. What we've done in the past, started in the past year and a half, is the beginning of the development of a new web platform called the Audience Engagement Platform. And the Audience Engagement Platform is dedicated to helping create more performances more often through partnerships with audiences. And we are looking at a back end for this platform to make it easier for artists with limited time, resources, and technological knowledge to be able to engage their audiences more fully in their creative processes. This includes having audience members actually booking unique experiences throughout the year in between performances, to being able to volunteer skills in different innovative ways, more so than is typically offered by an artist in most cases. So we are in the middle of developing this platform, which will be going into its beta in January. And I'll speak a little bit more about it if we have more time at the end, but I think we should continue to roll on through the groups. So, so that's the work. If I had one message from this, it would be that as an artist or an arts organization, thinking about your relationship with your audiences and the types of experiences that you're able to provide to them from a range of different lenses can be extraordinarily valuable to getting across the message and the experience of your art.
Thank you, Chris. Pat?
I'm Pat Cruz. I'm the executive director for Harlem Stage, previously known as Aaron Davis Hall. I've had over 30 years of experience in both performing and running arts institutions, and I was of the school that if you build it and you do it well, they will come. Well, they didn't. I've never read, and if you do it well, of course, I mean, you're doing quality art, right? And they're not there. Okay, so where are they and why are they not there? I've never read a business book manual in my entire life, and the title of this program alone, Capital and Consumption, oh my God, was not something that I was identifying with, but I have learned from those who have read business books and who do them. And we now have what I'm calling an institutional guru who is working with us as our marketing first. Mission is everything. How do the programs relate to the mission? How frequently are you turning out the product, and how do you make the product accessible to everybody? But he's become more than that, because really allowed us to look differently at our programs. Let me just say we've just completed 3 years ago a $26 million renovation of a city owned building called the Gatehouse. It sits on one of the highest points in Harlem. And someone here at one of the previous panels that I was attending said to me, "Oh, I've been to your place once. You're like the Black Bam." Okay, I hadn't thought of that, but I have thought of Harvey Lichtenstein as one of the primary models for bringing experimental, difficult, challenging work to a community and developing audiences around that. So I've learned as I've grown from my mistakes to see what we could do. We just completed a campaign just to raise $250,000 in a very short time to meet a matching grant. We raised $700,000 in that time in an economy that is hard, difficult, and I think you all seeing that article made you call me for this. At any rate, we had an article in the New York Times, and I was very pleased with it, but all it meant was more work, harder work, thinking more about who you are and what you do. One of the things that we came up with, and I'll speak to this more than, we have a program in which we bring in 10,000 children a year, go into the schools with artists. I'm very proud of that, but I don't think that's the point of what we're talking about right now. What we did was shifted our program model in order to attract a new demographic of audience. And that was very difficult for me. So I had to look at, because I'm somebody, again, who believes in art for art's sake. I want art that is informed, that is engaging, that challenges both the individual and the society. But I think we can still do that in a context that is more user-friendly. And we've created a program series called Uptown Nights. It is a socially interactive event with a DJ, a bar, heaven forfend, and a cafe with dancing and then performance. And the performers who have come to that, I think we have become both live and electronic, because one of the things that happens, and I just learned this yesterday too, I'm so much learning things, that Harlem is one of the highest points for twittering. We Twitter more than anybody else, I guess, at least in New York. And what happens is that we find that people are twittering, if that's what it's called, at the event. So it is both, they're interacting with one another, they're dancing, we don't have any seats necessarily, and some of our patrons are going, "Oh, you're really gone too far." But they're dancing and they're tweeting and twittering, and we have done everything that is now working. People are coming. We have sold out audiences. When you talk about who your audiences are, they're sold out, and I think we have some of the most diverse audiences in the city. When people come to us, they see everybody. And the everybody, I mean, clearly we're looking at targeting a demographic, but we're looking at our community first. We offer discounts to that community to be able to come in. Our tickets are free to $35 tops. And that is for some of the more expensive programs that cost us more to do. We have a flat membership rate that we've just put in place, $50, and you can become a member and you get 2 free tickets to an event. We have grown that audience, that over 300%, our membership. In this year's time, in which audiences are dropping off, people are watching their wallets, seeing what they can buy, but people can afford free, and they've taken advantage of it. Another part of the model that we're doing is to increase our partnership activities so that we're not paying for every program that we bring in, but we're sharing expenses with other arts organizations. The most recent is the Black Documentary Collective. We just had 300 people come out to see Freedom Riders, a new film by new documentary film by Stanley Nelson. So I say those things because those are important programs that we have initiated. Change is possible, yes. And we are being successful as a result of adapting our lives and our programs and our activity while still holding on to that mission. And I think that's the most important thing, because we still do the programs where you can sit down and come and hear some of the most fantastic people. But one other kind of programmatic thing that we're doing, Jason Moran, who just won the MacArthur, is doing a project with us, an incredible composer, pianist, that he is doing a project on Fats Waller. So we're going back to the tradition and bringing it forward. He's performing with Michelle DiGicello, and they're doing a Fats Waller dance party. So it brings dance back to a community for which jazz was a very important component, and that dropped out of the picture. So we're transforming because life transforms, and I think that we've been successful in doing that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Pat. Randy?
Randall Bourscheidt, and my organization, the Alliance for the Arts, is the first one you're going to hear about that doesn't actually do anything in terms of the arts. We talk about it, we research it, we advocate for it, we try to promote it, and by it I mean every conceivable form of cultural expression in this city and to a certain extent the state, and so. And we've been doing this for almost 35 years, and of course we started doing it in print in 1976. I think we did something called a Guide to New York City Museums, which was astonishing because it presumed that someone wanted to spend a few hours in New York City. At that time, that was a revolutionary idea. Now we're on the web, and we've developed NYC Arts and NYC Kids Arts. We thought it was also important to have comprehensive information available to teachers and parents for younger kids. The two sites obviously work together. They are, the content, the design is ours, the system is ours, but the content is derived from submitted by the cultural organizations. So it's meant to be a kind of megaphone or a screen in which they can place their own advertisements, both in-depth information about them as institutions in terms of their mission and goals, but also, of course, what they're doing now. But having done that, and we're very pleased with the traffic that we're getting and the response, we've now moved, with the help of a Rockefeller Foundation Innovation Grant, later this month we will launch a system of phone apps. And the initial reaction, we've been doing some test marketing, and people are excited, and that makes us feel like we're about to make another contribution to this field. Our objective is accessibility. We want these organizations to be known to everybody who lives in New York, regardless of their means, to feel more accessible. We're also interested in making the information available to tourists, because in many instances they're an important part of the market, and they're certainly an important part of the city's economy. And in our research side, we've done a lot of investigation into the role of the arts in attracting tourists. It's very, very important. What we're talking about, I think, is what a friend of mine in marketing at a Hollywood studio always refers to as WOM, word of mouth. He used to say in olden days, the reason we take advertisements out is to generate word of mouth. As you see, it still happens. But I think all the online methods of communicating, tweeting and so forth, are just a more democratized and more vastly enlarged system of exchanging that word of mouth. And the principle there is that you get interested in what people around you are interested. There's nothing more convincing than a friend, a relative, a teacher, anyone you have a relationship with or respect, expressing enthusiasm. Frankly, that's what happens in a theater. That is part of the magic of the theater. They're up on the stage creating an illusion, and you're aware of, ideally you're not talking out loud to your fellow audience members, although in New York you are, of course, but there's really nothing, even tweeting is not quite as exciting as being at a rock concert with 10,000 people who are, just fainting with excitement, or at an opera, or at a Philharmonic concert, or a theater performance. And the same is true in a slightly different way with the museum experience. And I think that's one reason why after 9/11, besides the creation of, thank you, Craig, of the Tribeca Film Festival, we were all somewhat astonished to see that attendance at museums and other cultural venues increased. The theory was, not provable, that people felt, in the insecurity of the moment, felt the need for a safe social experience. That's also at the key of the cultural experience, I think, or at the heart of it. What else can I say? I think that's all I'm going to say at this moment.
Thank you, Randy. And I should confess that in a prior life, I worked with Randy at Alliance for the Arts as the Director of Development. So it's one of these organizations that has a very macro view of what the arts mean and what they mean to the city and the state. And it's made me an advocate for the arts. Paul?
Thank you.
Thank you.
I spent 30 years on Wall Street and decided at the relatively young age of 55 that I wanted to do something different and wanted to work in the not-for-profit sector, and lo and behold, I found myself as chairman of the New York Philharmonic a year later. But also, significantly, from the point of view of funding the arts, I was also a trustee for 10 years of the Mary Flagler Carey Trust, which very well might have been the broadest funder of arts organizations, music and education in the city. Unfortunately, we gave away all our money earlier this year, and so that source is gone. Patricia, I should also say one of my first great experiences in the music world was going to Lewiston Stadium, which nobody here even knows about, where the New York Philharmonic played, and great ballet and so on during the summers. It was up by City College, so it was absolutely wonderful. Obviously, the New York Philharmonic is a little bit different than the other organizations we've talked about, since it was founded in 1842, and this year gave its 15,000th concert, which is more than any other orchestra in the world. And being a wonderfully provincial New Yorker, I love to brag about the fact that we are the third oldest orchestra in the world, succeeded only by, I think it's Leipzig and maybe Cologne, or
Berlin.
No, not Berlin, and we were founded the same year as the Vienna Philharmonic. So obviously the New York Philharmonic has done something right, but nothing changes because at its first concert we played Beethoven's Fifth Symphony. So, and as one of the predecessor development people at the New York Philharmonic once said, if we play Beethoven every night, we can sell out every night. It's very challenging these days running any kind of an arts organization, and the New York Philharmonic is not immune to that either. And at the same time, we are in some ways more vibrant than ever because I think we made a wonderful choice in Alan Gilbert as our new music director at age 42 or 43. So we have opened up a whole new vista and spectrum, which I think is incredibly important because we had all fallen into the rut of recirculating music directors that were my age. Going the youth movement route, if you will, is absolutely terrific because he can communicate to a whole different generation. And that, to me, is what this is all about, communicating and opening up the programming to a lot more people than what had traditionally been called the blue-haired ladies that come to matinee performances. What's interesting about that, to disabuse that reputation, if you will, or that fact, the average age of attendees at New York Philharmonic concerts is 51. Subscribers are about 55 years of age, and single ticket buyers are 47. Significantly, 30% of single ticket buyers are under the age of 35. And so, in spite of what we say, there is a younger generation that's learning about classical music. Unfortunately, so much of what they have to learn is on their own, because the education side of things has been decimated in arts education, which is a disgrace. And yet, many institutions, the New York Philharmonic included, as well as others here today, have music programs. And we sponsor a music program in about 12 different schools around the city. The Opera does it. Lincoln Center does it, Carnegie Hall does it. So we're filling in that gap, which I think is incredibly important. Survival, obviously, is the key, because you not only have to build audiences, and while the recession caused some decline, up until recently we were running probably about 90% of capacity, and there are 2,700 seats in Avery Fisher Hall. We are also international, so we have traveled the whole world, but the high point every year for me was our Parks concerts in Central Park, to look out and see 70 or 80,000 people, although the city would not allow us to count above 50,000 for political reasons, because then, who knows, I never understood that. I also had one of the great come-down experiences in my life, because I had to get up and talk to 70,000 people in the first concert. This was 15 years ago. I got up and thanked all the donors and so on. And the next day I ran into a friend of mine, and he said, "Paul, that was a great concert last night. Were you there?" So obviously people came for the music, not to hear Guenther speak. I would say, given the commitment of so many people to the arts, that the future, while of concern, is bright. Because when times are troubled, people tend to turn to music and dance and opera and so on, and I think that that's very important. Also, from my Carey Trust experience, I can tell you the number of young students in music schools all over the city is absolutely extraordinary. And one way or another, that will build the audience. We also have an interesting responsibility, because you can't always play Beethoven's Fifth. It's our responsibility to try to broaden the base of new music. It's something that Alan Gilbert feels very strongly about. And I should get a plug-in for Columbia, because Henry Kravis, who was in the paper this week, Columbia Business School, gave a very substantial grant. But he also has been a funder of commission pieces for the New York Philharmonic. And Russ Carson, another Columbia Business School donor of significance, has been a major funder of school day concerts and school programs at the Philharmonic. We have, in a week in May, we have about 11,000 children come to 10 concerts or something like that. It's extraordinary. So the future's there. We have to take it very seriously. I don't think you can count on government at all. So we have to count on ticket buyers and donors. And that's hard work, and that's what I did for 13 years, chased after money. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And thank you, panelists. I'm looking at the time, and it's going quickly. So we started 10 minutes late, and I think we're going to go 10 minutes over, leaving us 15 minutes. What we have here today is a group of leaders in the arts from different perspectives, nonprofit, for-profit. We have people working across media. And they have insights into a range of audiences. So the links might not be initially clear between what they all do. I'll pose a question to the group, and anyone may answer, and I hope that they have questions for themselves, which is how, and Randy, this is again something that I learned while at the Alliance, that the power of the collection is more than the sum of its more than the sum of its parts, that groups can and should be working together. So I pose that as a question, and I'll throw out a couple others so you have an idea of how I have hoped that this conversation might go. The first question, which I asked about our panelists' audiences and how they know, this question of measurement, and how they defined the return on the investment was a leading question. We're at Columbia Business School. To contextualize the discussion within the discourse of social enterprise in the business world, I wonder how you all might characterize your audience, the role of your audiences in supporting specific business goals, which are either internal or external to the organization, particularly with this shift in the funding climate that the Americans for the Arts suggests is happening, that it's less philanthropic and more sponsorship and marketing oriented. What are the key opportunities here to build arts audiences and meet these business goals? And a related question would be, how might audiences be used so as to relieve the fundraising pressures imposed by traditional philanthropic models? So
Can I start?
Please.
First of all, obviously the audiences are very important. 2/3 of our budget, which I'm a year out of date, but it's probably around $60 million, comes from either the audience itself in ticket purchases or through contributions. The rest comes from endowment and so on. So obviously you're catering to your audience and getting them to understand what the issues are all about. There's another interesting factor, and I got myself in tremendous trouble a week on the job a long time ago when I said to the orchestra committee and some of the administrative people, well, you know, we're running a business here. And they were aghast that the New York Philharmonic could be called a business. Well, I think in the ensuing 10 to 15 years, all of us in the arts have learned that we are indeed running a business. And I think it's so important looking at the students at Columbia Business School that are interested in social enterprise and so on and are learning about the business side of things. So it's very important that we spend a lot of time doing market analysis. We have a tremendous knowledge of who our audience is, what our potential is. We have become more and more focused in how to get particular audiences. We've got a tremendous website. And we send out email blasts all the time. So I think the key is you've got to run it like a business. You have to know your audience, and you have to focus on them and treat them well.
Can I just pick up on that and say that I completely agree with Paul that nonprofit organizations should be run in small b business-like fashion. There's a book out called Zilch. I don't know if any of you know of it, but the author makes the argument that nonprofits managers are among the best managers in American society because they have zilch for capital and are forced to be more creative. I invite you to read it and see if you agree or not. But I think the real point, and it fits in with the context for our discussion today, is that the purpose of cultural organizations is social enterprise. It's changing society more than making a profit, and that's how you measure the effect. You don't want to lose money, or you certainly can't lose money, although my friend Bruce Crawford, when he was chaired the Met Opera, said, in my advertising agency, I like to make money. Here at the Met Opera, I'm in the business of losing money. Your point, about 60% is the average amount of total income that earned income represents. So we're dependent on contributions from a variety of sources to make up that difference.
Yeah, I'll give you, from the Tribeca standpoint, we ended up with a very interesting model that we figured out after the first year, that the straight not-for-profit route was not going to be sustainable, largely because our model, we get less than 10% of our income from selling tickets, and the vast majority is from commercial sponsorships from 70 different sponsors who increasingly want more and more what are called rights and benefits. They want metrics, because we talked about how do you are you generating the right return? So we're very sensitive to the tension between the creative, but that our model is very much a standalone marketer model. We have no endowment. We do have a sister not-for-profit, and we match not-for-profit activities with the not-for-profit sources of funding. But the festival, as an example, to build out a sustainable model, 'cause I'm going to say scalability and sustainability are absolutely essential. And so, for example, we have a very significant partnership in the Middle East, in Doha, where the festival at the end of the month will be, so we're international, we've been to Shanghai, we've been to Hong Kong, but you have to think also about sitting up here are various brands, and you have to manage your brand. And you can't compromise with the business model driving everything. If you compromise the brand, the game's over. Yeah. So the real challenge is staying true to the mission and the brand, and then juggling, as Paul, you get up every day and say, well, I will also take, without endowment, without charitable contributions, there's only so long you can lose money. And even as a for-profit, we can verify that personally. It took us about 8 years before we got to break even. We actually, at Tribeca, we raise capital from outside investors. So it's kind of this mingling of the not-for-profit model with the for-profit model, and we get a lot of interesting, the philanthropy world is watching closely. We actually just did something, Randy, as I think you know, with the Rockefeller Foundation as well, looking at new models. So I'm going to say, and I'll close by saying on this one, there used to be something called, at 11 o'clock when the news came on, they used to say, it's 11 o'clock, do you know where your children are? The new phrase would be, it's 11 o'clock, and do you know where your audience is? We have to go find the audiences. And so we use the commercial model as opposed to the more reliance. And I would call it the fact that you have the patronage system where people are really willing to pay for that. But independent film is a very different, you just don't know what you're getting. So it's very much a discovery. Everybody knows Beethoven's Fifth. When you have no talent, subtitled film, you don't really know what you're getting. So our curation is very, very important. I think that's a big difference in terms of the kind of model you have.
Well, interestingly, along that line is in programming, you have to be very careful because, as I said, we have a responsibility for new music. But if you did an and they've done away with this term, we used to call them turkey nights, it's very simple. If you want to have a new commissioned piece, you should start the symphony out with a Rossini overture, then the new piece, and then you finish up with a Beethoven symphony. And everybody's educated as to you'll fulfill that responsibility. The other thing that is very important, and it's something the Philharmonic has done very successfully, is we have an extraordinary relationship with Credit Suisse. Now, Credit Suisse is an international firm. The New York Philharmonic is an international orchestra, and they really benefit from the fact, the exposure, both here in New York, but literally all over the world. So it's a wonderful partnership, but it brings together business and the arts in a very wonderful way.
Wonderful. Thank you, Paul.
There's also thinking about the way that you're working with your audience. In the arts, we typically have a unique live experience where people leave inspired, which yes. You don't have in a lot of other industries to that, to that degree. And when audience members leave inspired, especially for like dance companies or theater companies or touring groups that don't have regular performing in any given city, there's not necessarily a way to channel that inspiration and excitement. So it all will slowly dissipate, and then you have audience churn the next year that you're doing performance. So looking at ways as arts companies that we could engage audiences more to have experiences throughout the year, and have audience members pull those experiences from you as a dance company or a theater company as opposed to necessarily pushing them to the audience members. So looking and listening to what types of unique experiences might your audience be interested in helping create on demand it's a really kind of critical piece, I think, for organizations, and to be listening to what type of social experiences and educational and artistic experiences are being desired, and how can you enable audience members to actually bring those into being.
I was going to get loosey-goosey, but you already did with that. Because I was going to say, we've got the metrics, we've got the database, we're working with that, and I think we're doing much better. But I think that as I looked at this phrase, return on investment, both personal and organizational, I thought that to develop an engaged, creative, and curious public, whether that's your community members, your citizens that are going to be prepared to be citizens of the world. Because unfortunately, and as you've said, Paul, our educational institutions are not doing that. And I think it really becomes a part of the responsibility of arts organizations to do that. And inspiration is the key to that, moving to the next step of engagement.
Thank you, Pat.
Could I just, I wanted to make you aware of another discussion, if you have the appetite after this one. I hope you enjoyed this one. But, the Alliance is organizing a discussion which you are welcome to attend on, called The Give and Take of Cultural Branding. And there are three, it's at the New York Times on Monday, October 25th, a couple of weeks, in the morning. I don't know if that's convenient for students. 8:30 breakfast, 9:30 to 11 discussion at the New York Times Center on 41st Street. And you go to the Alliance for the Arts website to register, but it's free, and you're more than welcome. But the speakers, Craig knows the setup there. It's a fun venue to have this kind of discussion. The speakers are Arthur Cohen, who is the advertising agent for a lot of museums and other cultural institutions, the Met Museum and others, and a real kind of visionary in terms of marketing culture. Our Andrew Hammingson, who's the executive director of the Public Theater, and Glenn Northington, who I bet you know, who does community affairs and marketing for Target. Target being a corporation with an extraordinarily strong presence now in the area of cultural marketing and co-branding. So
We have,
don't believe in branding.
we have audience development happening right here.
exactly. Sorry.
The time is almost up, but I will just take two questions from the audience if you have them. Yes, sir. That would be great.
Greenfield. I work for the Orchestra of St. Luke's. I'm an alum from '05. I also work with a number of dance companies through friends, Lamone, Rio.
Who also worked at the New York Film
And
Festival.
big fan. So I was actually hoping I could just make a very quick statement to the students in the room, which is consider arts management as a career. Unfortunately, not enough Columbia students end up in arts management. I think it's one of the most incredibly rewarding sectors. So it's the best return on your own investment, I believe. Quick question for Chris and Patricia. We're talking about bringing our audiences along. I'm interested to know about bringing your artists along, these new paradigms that you're talking about, how you create that, that movement with your own community before you even bring it to the audiences themselves. Thanks.
I can speak to that most immediately. We're in the midst of 4 commissions that we're doing right now, and commissioning artists is one of the best ways, and you talked about that too, Paul, when someone can commission a new work, because that means, and we spend and invest in those artists from 2 to 3 years for the development of a new work, and we've got 4 processes in the pot right now. So, and that can cost, for us, it's going to cost about $300,000 for each of those works. But in doing that, we're creating opportunities for other artists because they're rehearsing those pieces. Other technicians are involved in the process of that work. So for me, it's one of the most rewarding things we do. It also happens, unfortunately, to be one of the most expensive things that we do, but I think with the highest reward because it's new, inspiring work.
Just one more question.
Oh.
Nope.
Should I just
Please, Chris.
Just to speak to it? You know, our dancers, you know, first and foremost are in the studio and creating new work and performing them. But we've also been looking together as a company at ways that we could share other aspects of who and what we are as artists with our audiences. So we started a couple years ago kind of training all of our dancers in blogging techniques. And for some of them, at first they jumped right into it, and some of them were hesitant, and some of them are more verbal than others, and some of them are are And it was interesting to watch as each artist found different ways of expressing themselves. Like one of our dancers does lots of watercolor paintings and started doing watercolors in some of the blog posts, which really connected out to their audiences really nicely. So that's definitely a way they're kind of connecting the artists themselves to audiences in new ways. Has also been reinforcing for us as individuals as we're kind of seeing the different ways that we can speak and kind of open up with our audiences.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, just one more question. First man to the podium.
Hi, I'm Dan Blumberg. I'm an MBA student downtown at Baruch College. I just had a question. We've been talking about developing new audiences, and I'm curious to know what success you've had in converting those new audience members to become donating members to your organizations. If there are particular online tools that you're using that you're having success with them, I'm curious to know what they are. Thanks.
Well,
anyone?
Our members who come in at the $50 level have been turned into donating members, especially through the website where it's Donate Now, and that was a very effective way for us to raise the money that I talked about that we raised, $700,000+ in about a 6-month time. So it was a really critical factor to explode and to expand out. And those contributions ranged from $1 to $50,000. So.
Converting donors or getting donors is a very complex issue. However, what it really comes down to, when all is said and done, it's people-to-people relationships. So we, at the Philharmonic, you take people to dinner, you have chamber concerts, you have concerts or singers or violinists in people's homes and so on. And the return on that investment is truly extraordinary. The time is very well spent. And over my experience, I saw any number go from 0 to $25,000 or $50,000. But boy, you have to spend the time at it. And I've managed to lose 15 pounds since I've stepped off the.
That's good.
Well,
no more dinners.
Well, I don't think that I want I don't want the conversation to end. So I hope that you will continue to speak after we close here. But thank you to our panelists, and thank you all for being here.